So, what would be some trends in the data, some really common things you found amongst the people you interviewed?
Yeah, so if I was going to look at like painting a picture of them and pull out some of the data, for instance, what we found was our sample was much more highly educated than the country as a whole. So 50% of the country has some college education or higher. Over 80% of our sample had some college education or higher. We found that kind of astounding, especially when we looked at discrimination rates from K through 12, which were horrible. I mean, I can't remember, I can't pull this statistic out right now, but a number of our people, I think it was almost 30%, had experienced abuse in, K through 12 because they were visible as trans kids. For the people who were visible as trans kids, 30% experienced some form of abuse. And a whole lot of that was from teachers.
Oh, God.
So, it's not just peer abuse, but young trans people in K through 12 are surviving abuse at the hands of their teachers, and yet going on to higher education. So one of the things we saw was an incredibly resilient sample, right? So you get through all that abuse, you still go to college. People also experience harassment and abuse in college. Maybe they leave, they go to the labor market, there's no job for them, they go back to school. That's what we thought we saw in the data, which was kind of this revolving door, if you will, of trying to find a place to really make your life and livelihood in a reasonably secure way. Abuse in school, double the unemployment. Our sample was living at or below the poverty line, which is $10,000 a year or less, and the census is the lowest income category. Despite this much higher education level, they were living in poverty at 4 times the rate of the general population. Then, you go to do something like basic health care. 13% have been refused treatment in emergency rooms. 50% had to teach their provider how to take care of them. Their doctor had no idea how to do basics of transgender care. A strong percentage had no access due to either, no provider or no insurance or no money. Obviously, living in poverty at that higher rate. So, what we see is just this, it's a gauntlet, right? It's like, going to elementary school, going into the job market, trying to get health care. Then you look at the public accommodation figures, and everybody from, bus drivers to store clerks the police abuse and harassment was also extremely notable. In the public accommodation data, police were among the highest abusers in terms of harassment and verbal abuse. So there is this sense of where do you turn, and if there's a bright light in the data, what we saw actually affirms the really good work of Caitlin Ryan, who's doing this work on family acceptance out on the West Coast. She's doing a longitudinal study of families who support their LGBT youth and ways in which they're building resilient youth. What she found was there's a group of accepting behaviors or rejecting behaviors, and families that show the accepting behaviors are much more likely to have healthy LGBT kids, whereas families that are showing rejecting behaviors are much more likely to have the kids that are trying to commit suicide or, showing addiction problems and other health problems, depression. So what our study found was for families that are supporting transition, that are maintaining ties, that, for instance, spouses or ex-spouses who are not trying to cut off ties to children, people in our study who are experiencing family acceptance are extremely resilient, more resilient than the whole sample. And I can't pull this statistic out for you right now, but you could just download the report and get it because I just can't remember it.
Okay.
But there's a much higher level of family acceptance in the report than we thought we'd find. A lot of families are figuring out how to get the resources they need to adjust and support, adjust their viewpoints and support their trans family members.
And so these families, these are from, like all over the country, from different
Yeah.
backgrounds, from.
Yeah, absolutely. And there was some of the data really flies in the face of what people say about people of color communities being less accepting. We found, for instance, that the black trans people, even though their experience out in the world was much more difficult, they were experiencing much higher, discrimination, police abuse, verbal and physical assault. Their families were actually more accepting than the white families. Which I have found to be true in my anecdotal work in communities. And I just think the public view of this is really off. And so we found it in the data as well.